Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we are reading the book In His Hand, written by Sophie Perez and Arpad Shu, describing the story of Arpad's life, a young Romanian SDA pastor in the times of the former Soviet Union. In our last reading, we completed chapters 3 and 4, where Arpad reminisced of the miracles that led him successfully through high school. He recalled how the principal, who was also the philosophy teacher, had always tried to humiliate him and his Christian Adventist beliefs. But Arpad had always stood firm and had an answer to every question the director could bring. He recalled the project he was engaged in on behalf of his literature teacher, and how his leadership of that project was used by God through the efforts of the teacher to get him reinstated in high school after he was expelled because of his Sabbath absences. He also recalled that when he had to take his exit exams, one of them fell on a Sabbath, and he didn't attend, resigning himself to the thought that he would have to wait another year and take them again. To his surprise, going to school the following day to take the rest of the exams, he discovered that God had worked yet another miracle. And because they had only been able to cover some of the students that previous day, those with surnames ending in S and beyond were to take the exam that day. Arpad graduated successfully, but his reminiscences came to an abrupt halt as the interrogator entered his cell to inform him that they would send him back to Romania to face charges if he didn't provide answers to their questions. We pick up the story now in chapter 5, entitled Waiting. "Any word yet?" Ferry had asked Arpad. "You better start making other plans, because you probably won't make the cut for seminary." Waiting in Romania was a fact of life. Nothing happened quickly, it seemed, especially for 18-year-old Arpad. Now that he had graduated from high school, he had to wait to see if he would be accepted into the seminary. Every reference in his life had to be questioned. Every questionable action in his life or flaw in his character evaluated. The church had too much to lose if they made one poor choice in the chosen 10. These seminary students would have a huge responsibility resting upon them. And if one dark spot existed in the past, it could hold too much risk for the future. The future of church growth and leadership rested heavily on this little band. Each graduating pastor would have the responsibility of caring for 5 to 6 little churches in a district. He would have to drive a long way every weekend. There wouldn't be much support financially or emotionally. It was a serious profession to want to enter. Will the seminary check into all the years before I was baptized? Maybe they will find something crazy I did and not allow me in, Arpad worried. He checked the mail every day, and one day the notice arrived. He had passed the entrance exam and was accepted. Arpad was filled with joy. The long wait had been worth it. "I won't let you down, Lord," he promised, knowing what a privilege he had just received. He moved to Bucharest, the capital city of Romania, with a population of 2 million, and dived into his studies. The seminary students were assigned to work with local pastors and their churches on the weekend to gain practice. Arpad loved the seminary and felt continually thankful that he had been given his dream. One day, in his first quarter, the dean and the Romanian Union president, Elder Dumitru Popa, called him into their office. "Arpad, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you," Elder Popa said. "Something has surfaced in your past that could be a serious character issue against your name. This is a huge concern because of the shortage of pastors in Romania. Churches don't want to take chances on funding someone about whom they have any concerns." Elder Popa's face crinkled in sympathy. Arpad gulped. His mind raced to all the times in his past when he possibly could have done something serious. He had always been rather a rascal. He hadn't always kept the Sabbath, and he hadn't always had a relationship with God. But surely this wouldn't keep him back now. He had never done anything serious to damage his character reputation. He listened as Elder Popa continued. "A certain family from a church your father used to pastor a little while ago has come to tell us that you had inappropriate contact with a girl, that on a camping trip a few years ago, you took her inside your tent. Is this true?" "What? Of course not." Arpad was indignant. "I don't know what you're talking about." He racked his brain. Who would say such a thing? For what reason? Where could they have dug up this crazy accusation? Suddenly, the reason dawned on him. "I think I have an idea of where this came from. And I promise, it isn't true. You see, there were several girls," he blushed. "I mean, please, let me explain what really happened and defend my character." "Go ahead." "When I was 15, there was a family in the church whose daughter really wanted to be my girlfriend. I wasn't interested in her, and I didn't respond to her advances. However, her parents were the only ones who had a car, and they would ask me to go ice skating with them a ways away on a pond that was excellent for skating. I would, and when I skated with their daughter, I held her hand. That was the extent of our contact and the relationship. One day, friends from Hungary came to visit me, and we all went camping together. It was a youth camp with many other people from the church. The girl's family was along. My friends and I met some other girls from another village there, and we hung out with them. We were hiking together, and that evening, we all got together in a big tent to play games. I was never alone with any girl in a tent, and nothing inappropriate happened. Now, the parents of the girl who wanted me to date are spreading lies about me because they're angry that I didn't date their daughter. What can I do to convince everyone that I didn't do anything wrong?" "I'm sorry, Arpad, but this is a serious charge. We will have to go back to the church board of this village and talk with them," Elder Popa said. "You probably will have to leave Bucharest to come with us to give your testimony." The girl's family had a strong influence in the church board, Arpad discovered, and he found that even 3 years after the event in question, the board was biased against him. The seminary leaders even hunted down the others who had come on the Campton trip with him and the other families in the group. They all supported him. No, there is nothing wrong with his character. We never saw this kind of thing happening, they confirmed. Still, The family felt wronged, and with their church members, continued to complain about Arpad attending the seminary. Again, Elder Popper called him into his office. Arpad could tell that he seemed uncomfortable and sad. Elder Popper sighed and asked Arpad to sit down. "What's wrong?" asked Arpad. "Did you hear something else about my character from 3 years ago?" He sat down in the chair in front of the president's large desk. "No," said Elder Popper, choosing his words with care. "But the faculty of the seminary and I feel that the best way to calm the church down will be for you to pull back from the seminary for a while. We will allow you to re-enroll after things have quieted down." "Pull back from the seminary? What do you mean? That will be another 4 years from now. It was so hard to get in, and I've already started. That's not fair." Arpad jumped to his feet, his fists clenched. "Listen, Arpad," Elder Popper continued. "You're only 18, the youngest student ever to enroll in our seminary. There are 28-year-old students who are only beginning. Waiting a few more years will not hurt you. But 4 more years? That seems a lifetime." "It is not an order, but a suggestion." Arpad put his face in his hands. "But we do have some positive news, though," Elder Popper said. "We feel that the communist government is loosening up on their enrollment policy, and that within 2 years, we'll be able to enroll another 10 students. You will only have to wait for 2 years. We will look forward to seeing you again, and you will have a fresh start. You won't have to retake the entrance exam. Think about it. You could fight this, but I hope you will take our advice." Arpad thought and thought. "I feel like Joseph in the Bible, who was thrown to the dungeon when he hadn't done anything wrong. But if the faculty thinks it's best that I not be here right now, I should probably take their suggestion. 2 years still seem like a long time." "Okay," Arpad said finally, "if you think it's best." Arpad's father had moved to pastor in the town of Oradea, a town near the Romanian border with Hungary. Arpad returned to live with his family. He came to gain a lot of practical experience working for the church, and he was treated like a youth pastor. During this time, he also sold life insurance beside the Border Patrol station, and listened to many stories of how smugglers and illegal aliens would get caught, shot, or returned to their countries for harsh imprisonment. He listened wide-eyed to the stories the police would tell each other outside his little sales booth. What time he didn't spend helping at the church or selling insurance, he spent working as a plumber. "I'm wasting my time," he thought. "I could be halfway done with my seminary education right now. But instead, I'm installing people's pipes." "I don't know how this could be a part of your plan, Lord," he prayed, "but I sure am ready to start my real work for you." The end of chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Strategy. After pressing the government year after year for more students, the Adventist Church succeeded in winning government approval for increased enrollment in the seminary. We are allowed to practice our religion, but we aren't allowed to expand or organize, the church leaders had pointed out. It will be worse for the government if we don't have more pastors. The churches will not die off with no one to guide them as the government desires, but rather the congregations will continue to grow, with lay members leading, but with less order. It will be easier for the government to control an organized church than an unorganized one. The government finally accepted this reasoning, and 2 years later, as promised, Arpad was readmitted with 9 others into the seminary. The commotion about his past was forgotten. He became completely involved in his seminary duties and made friends easily. He and his seminary classmates, in order to share the workload, typed up their course notes between them. One typed up Adventist church history, another homiletics, another Romanian church history, another counseling. They also typed up Sabbath school lessons and other manuscripts. They typed the notes on thin white paper, put in carbon between the sheets, and made up to 10 carbon copies each time. Remembering his childhood days working with his father in bookbinding, Arpad started binding his and his classmates' notes and lessons. In Romania, the communist government ordered all the typewriters to be registered yearly, so that any printed material found could be immediately traced back to the typewriter's owner. All mechanical typewriters were unique like a fingerprint. Certain letters were hit harder, higher, or lower on the line. Printing material for coursework on campus wasn't an issue, but taking them outside of the school's parameters was illegal. The law allowed for printing some Sabbath school lesson copies, but the amount allowed was enough for only half of the church members in the nation. No songbooks had been allowed to be published since 1949, especially songs with music notes. The books of the well-known Adventist author Ellen White were forbidden as well. Anyone who wanted could have a Bible, but the cost of a Bible was as much as some people earned in a month. Many groups were already involved in smuggling Bibles. Arpad saw the hunger of the church for Adventist literature. Was there nothing he could do? He wondered. One day, when Arpad and 2 of his closest seminarian friends were walking to class, he brought up the subject. "Listen," he confided, his voice growing soft. He pulled out a Sabbath school lesson quarterly. "Can you keep a secret?" "Of course," his friends promised. "Can we trust each other with our lives?" His friends stopped walking. "Arpad, what did you get yourself into this time?" Mihai Baciu, his roommate, said with a laugh. "This is serious," Arpad said. He pulled them off the sidewalk and under a small grove of trees nearby. "Here, take a look at this." He flicked through the pages of the quarterly and handed it to Mihai. "It's a lesson study, Arpad. What's your point?" "How many of them do we have access to?" "Only a few, you know that. That's why we type them up and take them to the bindery." "Right. But what would happen if every church member had one across Romania?" Arpad made a wide sweep with his hands. "There are hungry churches with everyone zealous to study. Do you know how much they would appreciate buying this little copy?" Jacob tritely, the other friend, nodded. "It's true, but that's the way it's always been. There aren't enough to go around." "I know, Arpad continued. But we have access to them. How can we not do something about it? Don't you ever feel that you're not doing enough? Well, sure, Arpad, said Mihai. You know as well as I do what the consequences are for this, Arpad. It's illegal. First of all, there's no way we could type more copies than we are typing already. And these only supply us here at the seminary. Second, we would need to print them at a shop. Fat chance of that ever happening. And third, if the seminary got wind of this, we'd be kicked out. He thumped Arpad on the shoulder. Pastors are too valuable to take these kinds of risks. You know how hard it was for us to get accepted in the seminary. Jacob jumped in. There are government informants inside the seminary, as well as anywhere you go around the town. Any of our rooms could be bugged, and especially our faculty's offices and homes. Someone would find out and talk. If you're caught with more than 1 or 2 Sabbath school lessons outside of this campus, you're going to be sauerkraut in prison. If the government catches anyone smuggling, it's 5 to 25 years. His whisper grew hoarse and loud. Up to 25 years, Arpad. I know, Arpad said, nodding. Believe me, I've thought through all these reasons in my head. But I can't help thinking of all the people who want to study, who depend only on their pastor, if they're lucky enough to have one, only 1 weekend a month. Aren't they worth the risk? The message needs to spread to the entire world. Our little country sure is having a hard time hearing it. I can't sit back when people are starving for what I have and the power is in my grasp. I didn't come to the seminary to sit around when I have this chance. How so, Arpad? What chance? Asked Mihai. How are you going to print that many copies? How are you going to smuggle the amount you're talking of around the country? You're crazy. I know, but you haven't heard my plan yet. We've been typing up our notes for a little while now. And you know that bookbinder where we take our class notes? I'm getting to be rather good friends with him. He does a good job binding for us, and he's a trustworthy guy. I can tell. How can you tell? Arpad pointed to the Sabbath School Quarterly, still in Mihai's hands. You're holding it. This was printed on the Communist Army Press. It's not the original. Both friends stared. But it looks exactly like it, Jacob said. How can this be? And on the Army Press? How did it get printed there? There's no way. I've told you, Arpad said. My friend is good. Very good. And he's already been printing hundreds of them. He's been smuggling the quarterlies in and out of the press in his book bag. He smuggles the printing in page by page. He takes it apart, reprints it, and binds it back. I don't know how he does it exactly, because we don't talk about it, and I don't meet with him much now that he's doing this. I think he must do his bookbinding there after hours. Then he smuggles 10 or 20 out when he leaves at night. He passes guards daily, but no one checks his bag if he doesn't carry very many. The books add up every day. He lives in a 4th floor flat in the military area. Each time I've gone to pick up the small packet, I make a couple of rounds, enter through different entrances, and hide for a while before sneaking to his apartment to be sure that nobody follows me. He's very cautious, and so am I. But the government has instant searches inside the press, Mihai exclaimed. The government controls everything in a press, especially in their army press. That's one way they suppress communication and rebellion. Printing is the biggest danger for them. Don't you think they're watching for this kind of thing? If anyone suspects or follows this bookbinder and catches him, he will blame you. That's prison for him and for you. 5, 10, maybe 25 years, he reminded. It is a high risk, Arpad agreed. He's taken a tremendous risk, but he's getting paid very well. He was not making a whole lot of money before, and he's getting paid more money now than he could ever make on his own. I have confidence in him. Jacob raised his eyebrows. Since when have you had money to start an operation like this, Arpad? You're a seminary student. Where did you get this money? Are you practicing thievery as well? Come on, Arpad said. I know people. Some very dedicated church members from here loaned me the money to put up front. And when the books sell, they'll get their money back. Illegal books are very expensive, but they will be bought. Even though Adventists are persecuted here, they're very hard workers. Many of them go into the best businesses or are entrepreneurial, so they're doing well. God has blessed them. Even if they're poor, they will save up that money from anywhere to buy the book. Both friends nodded. They knew this was true. So you're going to smuggle more than quarterlies? Even books? Arpad nodded. We have to start small. But soon, it will be steps to Christ, the Desire of Ages, and then hymnals. Can't you see the churches thriving now? No more penciled stanzas for the choirs. There'll be spiritual food for struggling members. They will know Jesus as a closer friend than ever before. The government can't stop God. Did you say we? Questioned Jacob. Arpad, are you asking what I think you're asking? Of course, Arpad grinned. Mihai still looked dazed. This is absolutely crazy, he said. And you think you can do all of this on your own? His friend nudged him in the ribs, already ahead of him. No, I need your help. Both of you. Will you help me? Both friends were quiet, thinking of their future, uneasy about stepping onto a swaying bridge across an abyss. The late fall breeze ruffled the pages of the quarterly Mihai held in his hands. Other classmates passed him on the sidewalk a few yards away, oblivious to the question Arpad had just posed that would change these three friends' lives forever. Do you have a plan for how we're going to smuggle these quarterlies, these libraries around the country? Mihai asked after a long pause. It's going to take a lot of strategy. The end of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Black Market. Arpad picked up the small brown briefcase from the fourth-story apartment. He mentally weighed its contents. It wouldn't be noticeably heavy. Looking around quickly, he walked down the stairs and went several blocks to the tram station. He boarded the yellow electric tram and rode through the dark city to the train station, where he would wait for the evening ride at 9 o'clock. Chill wind blew in Arpad's face, but he kept warm in his thick sheepskin coat. That wasn't bad tonight, he thought, looking at the people lounging on the station benches nearby, bags in hand. He hadn't seen any of their faces before, and no one looked away into a newspaper when he glanced at them. No one looked suspicious yet, he thought with a sigh of relief, but he couldn't be too sure. Arpad always took a different way to the train station. Sometimes he went by taxi. Sometimes he got a ride in a friend's car. Sometimes he even walked the long distance, always making sure he varied the times and transportation so he wouldn't establish a pattern. If anyone followed him, he had to be alert so he could get rid of the briefcase and disappear. The train rushed into the station, squealing to a halt, and the gush of air from the hot engine puffed Arpad's hair from his face. He boarded the fourth car in front of him, lifted the briefcase onto the rack above the chairs, and sat down nearby on a hard seat. There were 7 other seats in his compartment, and only 2 of them were taken. Avoiding anyone's eyes, he turned to the window and watched the old buildings of Bucharest slip by outside the glass. Several stations later, near the edge of the city, his friend Mihai boarded the car, his tall frame filling the doorway. He sat 3 chairs down on the opposite side. Arpad continued looking out the window, not acknowledging his presence. At the next station, Arpad got out, leaving the briefcase on the rack above under the watchful care of Mihai. No one in the car would know if he were just taking a break to smoke in the aisle or to visit someone else. If the police were to come by, as they often did, pointing at baggage in the racks for the owner to open it, the briefcase would go unclaimed. No one could accuse Mihai of owning the briefcase because he hadn't brought it in. Mihai would watch the briefcase until another station, when Jacob would walk in, strolling through the cars to find a seat nearby. Mihai would exit, leaving the briefcase under his unacknowledged friend's eye. The next morning, when the train got to Brasov, Jacob would then unload it, and he would be approached by a church member who was waiting with a car to redistribute the material through local smuggling chains to the surrounding churches. The delivery was prepaid, and because the people, routes, and times always varied, there was never a noticeable pattern, nothing that could be recognized as suspicious. Jacob and Mihai weren't the only smugglers involved. Soon there were different people assigned to different routes to 5 major cities around Romania. The chain slowly grew to 20, 30, 40 people. Arpad never knew how many for sure. He left the distribution chain to trusted people from the villages. His responsibility was to make the arrangements, get the books printed, and then get them out of the city safely. When they traveled to major cities, the smugglers would often buy prearranged tickets. The next person in the chain at another station would know to look for car C, row 18. He would walk in, casually take the briefcase, and go to his own car, or else sit down nearby. All the details were carefully prearranged, down to the exact time of train arrival and description of the luggage. No one knew exactly who was at what station, but when they recognized one of the team members, they would leave. The team had to use a secret code when talking on any phone or in conversation. And everyone knew that north really meant west, and 6 lei, the Romanian currency, really meant 6 o'clock. Bad weather meant bad news. The hub city of Iasi really meant Craiova. Day by day, Arpad's smuggling team perfected their mission. One major accomplishment, of which Arpad and his friends were proud, was creating a songbook. 2 talented musician pastors, Orben and Faluvegi, put all the notes together for a 280-page book. Because every church had a choir, these books sold very well. For almost 20 years, they had been using handwritten notes painstakingly reproduced. Arpad picked up the literature from the bookbinder every day and hid it in different places: storage units, people's homes, attics, and basements. And then he and his friends spread them around the country. Sometimes people came to Bucharest to pick up a large quantity of books. This was more dangerous because heavy luggage usually got searched. Sometimes Arpad asked church members from northern Romania to come down with a car or a pickup truck with strong support in the back. On the bed of the truck, they would hide these books in small boxes so they wouldn't be evident. Too much contraband would make the truck sag, and sagging vehicles were usually stopped and searched. Even putting 2 suitcases in the back of a car would weigh down the car enough to be pulled over. Toward the end of Arpad's 2nd year in the seminary, his friend Mihai bought a red Dacia, a small Romanian car, modeled after the French Renault 12. He was the first seminary student to own a car. Though no students could leave the seminary without permission, Arpad and his friends decided to sneak off with a load of literature to take up to Bacău, a northern city where Mihai lived. At the bottom of the trunk, they placed Steps to Christ and the hymnals. With each book, the little car sank lower and lower. After the students had crammed in almost 2,000 books, they packed their seminary course books on top. They had several drop-off spots along the way, trying to make Bacău by nightfall. In the town of Roman, their last stop before Bacău, they were approaching a busy intersection when a blue and white police car pulled out behind them, its siren wailing. "Start praying," said Mihai. He saw the trunk. Arpad took one look at Mihai in the driver's seat and closed his eyes. Tight-lipped, Mihail pulled the Dacia over by the curb. They knew the officer had seen the heavy sag, even though there were fewer books in it now than when they had started. The police officer, dressed in a blue uniform and matching cap, strode to Mihai's window. "License and registration, please," he snapped. Then he asked to see the brake lights, headlights, and turn signals. "Where are you going?" he asked, abrupt and cold. "What do you have in your trunk?" "We're students," Mihai said. "Since it's almost the end of the year, we're taking some of our stuff home to Bacău." "Let's see what you have. Open the trunk." Mihai got out and led the officer to the back and unlocked the trunk. The officer saw the copies of homiletics and books on New Testament exegesis on the top. "What are these?" he asked, picking one up. "These are our course books," Mihai said. In the front, Arpad clenched his eyes, furiously mouthing his prayer. The officer started poking around, removing more books. "There's a lot here," he said. "We've studied a lot, officer. These are our textbooks, too." "How come there's so many of the same book?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Arpad held his breath. Mihai's vague explanation didn't satisfy the officer. "Open it up. Take everything out so I can see it," the officer ordered. Mihai slowly took some books out until the officer began ripping them out himself and piling them on the pavement. Arpad wanted to yell, "Go away!" "Lord," Arpad prayed, "please do something to take his attention off us. Please." It would soon be all over. He felt the sweat collecting on his face and heard Mihai's voice trying to stay calm and the officer's terse reply. Mihai's face looked worse than it did when he had eaten bad cafeteria food. The pile of books on the pavement continued to grow. The end of chapter 7 of In His Hand.